Hey, we want to let everybody in now, Rachel.
Yes, and I am starting to go live. So I was saying about 30 seconds we should be live.
Okay.
No, we're live now.
We're live.
All right. I'm gonna bring everybody in now. Here they come.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Rachel Green. I'm one of the founders and CEO of Women of Color Coalition. Tonight, we have a very riveting dialogue tonight. It's about mental health, especially for the BIPOC community. And we're looking forward to having two fabulous clinicians, leaders in their field, in regards to speaking to us tonight about mental health and helping us out and giving us great tips. Hopefully we'll learn how to look for signs within our family and friends, and definitely how to cope as women and folks of color. So with that said, I will be passing the mic to my fabulous, fabulous cohort in crime, Ann Shaw.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ann Shaw. I'm a co-chair and president of the Women of Color Coalition. I'm really excited about tonight's discussion. So I'm going to pass it over to Monica.
Good evening, everyone. I am Monica Hutchinson, and I am the Director of Governmental Relations for Women of Color Coalition. Thank you for joining us tonight. Like, I will echo my sisters, and I am passing the virtual mic over to my sister, Fatmata.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Fatmata Barry, and I am the chair for the Women of Color Coalition podcast. And I am excited to have these amazing ladies join us tonight. You're about to hear some wonderful things. So pay attention, listen, and hopefully you can get something out of it.
Thank you. And with that, I just will ask everyone for tonight, if you can please mute yourself when you are not speaking. That way it'll cut down on some of the feedback, so we can hear our panelists answer the questions and engage with everyone. Also, just know that there will be some questions asked, and like I said, the panelists will have discussion, open, honest discussion. There will be time at the end. Please feel free to put questions in the chat, or at the end, feel free to raise your hand virtually with the little signal, the little symbol on it, and we will call on you. You can ask your question directly to our panelists. And with that, I am going to ask Fatmata if you will. Oh. You're on mute. See,
Amanda,
look at
you're
that
on mute.
look at that, following directions and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Following too much your direction, right? So can you give me a second? My apologies.
Yeah, no problem. Well then, Anne, would you mind, because I think she's having some technical stuff. Would you mind introducing Anne first, please?
Hi. So I'm going to introduce our wonderful Reverend Dr. Julia Hankerson. I'm so excited to have you tonight.
Thank you.
She's been a psychotherapist since 1990. She's also a licensed clinical social worker in New Jersey. And she's the current owner and chief executive officer of Woodbine Wellness Center in Woodbine, New Jersey. That's awesome. And since from 2002 to 2003, she was a team leader, project director for Children's System of Care Initiative in the Cape May Atlantic counties in New Jersey's Department of Human Services. She's also a member of the Atlantic Cape Community College Human Services, Psychosocial Rehabilitation and Addictions Counseling, and Addiction Counseling Specialist. She's also the president of the board of directors for Volunteers in Medicine, president of the Woodbine AARP organization, president of the Greater Woodbine Chamber of Commerce, and member of the board of directors Association of Social Work Boards examination. So there's just a lot on your resume, but you know, we could be here all night on, but thank you so much for joining us, Reverend Doctor.
My pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you.
And, oh, there you go.
Would you like for me to have something to say right now?
Well, we're going to have Fatmata introduce your co-panelists.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so today we also have Melissa McLean. She is a licensed professional counselor, approved clinical supervisor with an MA, LPS, and ACS. She's also a professional coach and received her bachelor's degree in psychology in 2002. And I am honored to actually introduce, because I'm also a bachelor's in psych and I love it. She's the owner of the Morning Joy Counseling LLC, multi-clinical clinician group practice in Logan Township in Turnsville, New Jersey. And she has done amazing work. She's currently acting as the interim clinical director for Have Faith Behavioral Health, a new private practice in Hamilton, New Jersey. And she's helping to build and expand to serve the community that she's in and beyond that. She provides workshops for groups and organizations as it relates to mental health and personal professional growth. And there's a lot because she has done a lot. And she began her solo practice as a solo practitioner. She noticed that there's increased amounts of people seeking counseling, and it needed, this need pushed her and gave her the drive and the decision to expand the practice by bringing on additional clinicians who also share her passion for walking alongside others on their journey. There's a lot more, but welcome Melissa McLean to the panel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So ladies, yeah, legit, these ladies are really amazing, and there's always a good problem. It's always a good issue to have, trying to condense and fit all of their amazing accomplishments. So thank you guys for joining. So we are going to get started with some questions, and feel free, like I said, you know, as you answer, if you want to just tell us a little bit more about yourself, feel free to do that as well. But the first question, it is, so in addition to COVID-19, recent events have brought heightened attention to the specific stressors faced by Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities who may be experiencing heightened fear, anger, and grief at this time. What self-care tips can you offer to help Black, Indigenous, people of color communities through this difficult time? And whichever lady would like to go first.
Well, I can start. First of all, mental health counseling. That is excellent to help with because this is like a trauma that people are experiencing. And so licensed clinicians, that's what we specialize in. Now, the issue would be, you know, that a lot of folks of color don't go to professional counselors. And, you know, I think that one of the things we can do as a reverend also is perhaps reach out to places of faith and try to get the religious leaders to encourage individuals when they have these kind of issues to seek out professional help. I think that'll be very beneficial, as well as some other self-care tips, exercise, dieting. I mean, all of these things are really important. Eating what you eat is very important. Paying attention to your physical health is also very important. And then I'll throw it to Melissa, which I'm sure she has so much more.
Yeah, Julia, you're absolutely right. I think it's, you know, taking kind of the holistic approach in terms of being able to take care of yourself. I absolutely believe that it's also important for just really education, about mental health and about counseling, because there's so many people, especially in the Black and Brown communities, that for whatever reason may not know about the services, or even just generationally, it's been passed down that you don't talk about what's going on inside of the family, outside of the home, or you need to suck it up and you need to do what you have to do and not allow other things to kind of tear you down. I think more specifically with, what's been going on in the Black and Brown community, especially the past year, as far as the killings and just the racial injustices that have been happening. I think, part of the thing that can be helpful is to have a balance of how much information you take in. I think that it's very important to stay up to date on what is happening, because if you know what is going on, there's more of an opportunity for change to occur. Now, in the same vein, I also believe that one could also become overwhelmed, with everything going on, because I know for a time period, it was almost like you turn the television on, you turn the news on, and you're just hearing, shooting for a string of time, like shooting after shooting. And I think that a lot of it also has to do with the fact that we've advanced so much, in society, as far as being able to broadcast information as well. So we're easily inundated. So I think that part of self-care and all of that, especially for the community, when you feel more connected, is to just balance, how much information you take in as well. Again, know what's going on, but maybe not sit in front of the television, for hours on end, just watching the news feed repeatedly about what's going on. Another thing might be that could be helpful for somebody is to find a small way to be able to feel like you're giving back as well. Because sometimes if you feel like you're able to make a small difference, that can make a shift in somebody's, mental wellness too, because sometimes it can be easy to become depressed if you're hearing about all of the negative things that are going on and then feeling like there's no way to stop it. So finding one small way or thing that you can do to help to make a difference can also be helpful as well. And again, in addition to what Julie was saying, as far as, eating, and I also agree that, having leaders within the Black and Brown community to kind of stand up and to also advocate for counseling can be helpful, because in certain communities, people look up, to certain leaders. So I think that would be helpful as well.
Thank you both so much. I just had just kind of follow-up questions to both of you ladies, because I know you both mentioned food and diet. And I definitely agree with you, right? How do you say, like, you are what you eat? I know
Monica, do I have to give up, ladies? Does that mean I have to give up my Cheetos?
I know, right?
It's actually pleasurable.
No, for real, right?
No,
for you it's popcorn. Come on, sis, it's your popcorn. That's not funny with me. I know it's close. I know it's close by. But my follow-up question is so, especially within the Black community, we do know that food, soul food, that is definitely comfort. That's, a lot of food is comfort. The big Sunday dinners, a lot of times our Sunday dinners look like Thanksgiving dinners, but it's a way for families to come together after crazy days. And so, food definitely brings us together. And so I also know that sometimes our comfort foods are not the best.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, just some suggestions on how we can, improve our diet, or, like I said, for our self-care, but also stay connected in a sense to who we are in our community through the foods that we do love. I just wanted to know just some suggestions on how to balance that, because that is definitely, it seems like it's either or.
It doesn't have to be either or.
Okay.
Because some of it could be maybe just finding substitutions for things that you would typically eat. So for example, if somebody around the holidays, they eat candied yams or sweet potatoes, and they put put the marshmallows in it, you put the brown sugar in it, maybe substitute it out for something different that's not, without marshmallows, or, something that's a little bit healthier. Also, you can moderation as well, because just kind of growing up, I remember Thanksgiving dinners where we'd have so much food. And now when I look back, I'm thinking we didn't really need all of that food. So it could also be moderation, so where you still enjoy the comfort foods, but maybe not every single day. Just moderate it. And I'll throw my parents under the bus. I remember when I when I was in college, I started to kind of shift my mindset a little bit about foods. And I remember trying to get my parents to kind of change the way they were eating, because they were still eating a lot of the fried foods. And now, fast forward, my parents are eating healthier than me sometimes, because they've kind of been educated themselves, gotten educated, I should say, to eating, having better, healthier food choices, but they're still delicious. You can still season it up, you can still flavor it so that it still tastes good.
And I thought of another point too, is that you don't have to eat fried chicken all the time, but you can eat it sometimes.
Yes.
So, like you don't have to eat, like you can splurge every now and then. And whenever you're eating, if you're on a diet or anything, that you always have times where you can, enjoy yourself a little bit more. And so for those times when there's family get-togethers, nothing wrong with eating collard greens and cornbread and fried chicken. It's okay, but
Yes.
not every day.
Yes.
Thank you, ladies.
You're welcome. Good
You're
question.
welcome.
It's you, Ann. I'm sorry. Or
No,
Fatma.
it's
I'm
me.
sorry, Fatmata. I apologize. I got so excited. Y'all got me all excited thinking about macaroni and cheese and candy yams. See what happens? See what happens? No, I'm just joking.
Okay, so this again for any one of you amazing ladies. Do you ever work with the immigrant community, specifically the Black and immigrant community of color? Because we know that there are stressors that are specific to this community. And if you do, what sort of, or do you have culturally specific resources available to them, and how do you interact with them?
Well, let me start again by saying that I actually work for Melissa. I'm retired. I used to own the Woodbine Wellness Center, and I don't really own the Wellness Center anymore. I actually work for Melissa. But the interesting point is that I had my own private practice for 30 years, and in 30 years, I probably saw 10 people of color. And now, in our practice, and Melissa will talk more with you about that. I almost everybody that I see are people of color. So we definitely do work with people of color and the immigrant communities of color. I know in my own personal practice, there are cultural issues adjusting to the culture. Like some folks come in from, let's say, Sierra Leone or Ghana, and there's a major cultural shift that they have to make. And within our counseling, we definitely pay attention to the cultural shift, trying to understand their culture better and how we can help them to fit better into the culture in the United States without giving up who they are. So it's a little tricky, but nevertheless, it works. And I've seen success. And we want folks to be able to be comfortable in this environment, but also be comfortable in the culture that they bring to this environment. And Melissa?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Julia, because it's not about them kind of dropping or disowning their own culture to kind of fit in to the culture here, but it's just really being able to still embrace our culture as well. But as Julia was saying, yeah, so the practice, we do serve a lot of people from the Black and Brown communities. And I've noticed over the past year or so, and I don't know if it has anything to do with COVID or again, just kind of the information that's out there about the importance of counseling and mental health. But we've had such an increase of people calling in, wanting counseling, seeking out counseling. There has been such an increase in men, Black men seeking counseling, because I know that oftentimes, especially for Black men, you know, growing up, they're told they have to be strong, you know, you can't be a wimp, you have to, you know, deal with whatever life gives you essentially. And so it's amazing to see, you know, certain people that are reaching out for counseling. And so as such, because there's been such an influx, I've been, not just because of that, but I've really been working towards really building a practice that reflects, you know, the people that we serve. So we serve people of all, you know, races, nationalities, and I would like for the therapists to also kind of reflect those people as well. Because as I feel that as therapists, you know, we all go through schooling, we get licensed. I do believe that sometimes I don't believe, but I know that there's some people that are seeking counseling may only see a therapist of a similar race to them or only see a minority therapist because that's just where they are, you know, that's their comfort level. So I think that it's important actually on both ends, you know, to be able to have people who, you know, people would feel comfortable reaching out to be there for them. And I do believe that if a person of color comes into counseling and maybe they do have a therapist that they're seeing that's not of the same race, I think that that person can still help them. You know, one of the things that I really talked to my therapist about, especially during the past year when we had a lot of the racial injustices happening, was to be open, you know, to their clients of color, you know, to be open to having a dialogue about race with them and just really talking to therapists, you know, kind of processing it through with them, you know, about their own comfort level of talking to people of color, because I would hate for somebody to be a person of color to be deterred from coming to therapy because there isn't a person of color available, you know, on the other end either. And so I think that that's also something that if more people were even educated about that, the fact that somebody who's not a person of color, you know, can still be helpful to them, I think would help more people to reach out, because the fact is that there's still a disproportionate amount of therapists of color, you know, that are out there as well. So I think that can be a deterrent sometimes for people of color to seek out counseling.
So if you just follow very quickly, are there like specific programming or resources? Because especially with immigrants, right? There's,
Yes.
it's not just the fact that you're a person of color,
Right.
but there's the aspect where there are many homes where they're mixed status homes where, you know, you may not be the one that is out of status, it's a family member, but there's a stressor there. I grew up in that environment initially, right? So my mother was undocumented. I was technically undocumented, even though I was a child.
Right.
The paperwork was in, but you know, whatever. And knock on the door, my mother just disappears, right? Because especially back in the 80s, they used to do raids of homes. And all those things are happening in addition to what's happening out there when you walk out the door as a Black person. So it's sort of like how do people like that, how can you help people like that sort of deal with the all this that's happening? And then for some of us, you're also a woman, so like there's all this things that are there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a two-sided thing. I mean, one part is really dealing with the mental health, you know, kind of like, I mean, it takes a toll on someone's mind. I mean, that's a lot of, it's traumatic. It's traumatic thinking that every day that you wake up is a possibility that you could be deported. And I've had, family members that have, dealt with that. But I think that, so as part of just dealing with that, the mental health piece of it, but then also the practical side. So I know that there's different programs that are around to really help people to be able to help them to get documented as well, and kind of help them through the process. Because that's somebody's living in fear constantly, constantly anxious, constantly looking over their shoulders. And so that can be kind of the root cause of why that person is having these issues. And so if you're able to really talk to and help them more practically as well, then that could really help some of those fears to subside.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. So I come from a family background of mental health care professionals. My father is a master's in social work, and he worked with children. And then my sister just got her master's in social work. And so I've noticed a really huge demand for mental health care services. And I also sit on a board that provides free and low cost medical care in the Asian community. And we're always trying to find therapists and mental health professionals who are actually Asian Americans. So my question kind of addresses that. I can tell you from my own community, and Teresa, I see that you're also an Asian American therapist, but there is a gigantic stigma, especially in my community, when it comes to seeking mental health care. I think we talked about it earlier, that it's like, it's a sign of weakness, or people try to hide it. I mean, and because I grew up in an environment where it wasn't a stigma, I feel very fortunate, and it's surprising, but I kind of understand it. So what are some things? I mean, so my organization's a nonprofit. We actually do a lot of outreach and education to get people in, and we provide different languages for our therapists, but it's not easy to find them. So what are some ways do both of you think might be good ways to kind of remove that stigma for our communities, the BIPOC community, and also for a lot of women as well? And and how do we encourage people to kind of seek that help?
Well, I think I touched on it a little bit before, but let me start by saying I think that we have to really begin to openly communicate about mental health. And I think that folks, like, if you see a therapist, it's a secret. I think it can't be a secret anymore. Folks have to be proud to go to see a therapist. And we need to encourage folks to talk about that. The more folks that talk about it, the less of a stigma that's on it. I also, pointed a little to the religious institutions. And in the past, there were a lot of religious organizations who have basically said, you don't need mental health because you have spirituality, let's say. So I think that, if we can reach out to religious leaders and perhaps educate them and get them to embrace the idea that mental health is good for them and their parishioners and their organizations. We need to reach out to community leaders and have them speaking positively about mental health. People follow people. So we have to have leaders saying what needs to be said in order to make it more acceptable to pursue mental health when you need it. And I think there is a shift, because as I said, in my 30 years, I probably saw 10 people of color, and now I only work 2 days, but in those 2 days, which I love, I see almost all people of color. So, but I think that we really have to begin to openly discuss things and stop making something as important as mental health a secret. And
Yes.
that's in all, with all people of color. It's like in our culture, we all seem to make this a secret, and it's like a sign of weakness. And we have to begin to communicate that seeking mental health is a sign of strength. Melissa?
Yes, absolutely. And also I wanted to point out too that Teresa Santucci, she's also a therapist with Morning Joy Counseling as well. But yeah, I think that another way to really try to reduce the stigma, in addition to kind of education and like Julia was saying, to having leaders in the community speak out and, you know, affirm mental health counseling and improving your mental health, is maybe to have different types of, you know, events to where the events are around more neutral topics. So for example, like I've done some workshops on stress, like, you know, just kind of like how do you deal with the holiday stress? So it's kind of like, you know, just an entry level type of event, but then talking about mental health, because in some of those workshops that I've done, you know, I was actually surprised myself, you know, how many people were receptive. And, you know, I've done workshops with different groups and with groups with, you know, people of women of color as well. And they were just, you know, kind of surprised, like, oh, wow, maybe I do need to, you know, get this checked out. And I've had people just kind of start talking. So I think once people have the platform, the avenue to, and the space to really open up and share, I mean, you would be amazed at what comes out, and even them themselves are surprised. And so I think like something neutral to kind of, you know, lessen the stigma can really be helpful to get people to see that, you know, maybe going to counseling isn't that bad, or maybe this is something that I really need, because we really don't want people to wait until they're at the very end of their rope until they reach out either. So I think it's helpful to catch it, you know, before it's at, you know, a 10 or beyond, to where it's harder, or where, you know, and unfortunately, you know, suicide rates have gone up so much as well, you know, especially this past year with everything. So, no, I would hate for people to wait, you know, until the last minute. So a lot of it is really just like Julia was saying, education, you know, having the trusted leaders, you know, just really talk about the importance of checking your mental health. Just like we go to the doctors, our primary care doctors, we have to get certain routine annual checkups. Same thing, you know, our minds are part of our bodies as well. And a lot of people forget that.
Wow, thank you for that, doctors. You both are just a wealth of knowledge for us tonight. The next question that we have for you, and then after that, we're going to open it up to our guests to be able to ask some questions. So I'm looking forward to you ladies being able to help some of our other sisters and allies out there. But the next question is, if you can explain post-traumatic slave syndrome and what we could do about helping our communities to work through this syndrome.
Shall I start again? It's a post-traumatic slave syndrome. Is very similar to post-traumatic stress disorder. It actually is kind of like a new term, but it's the reaction of African Americans to traumatic events in our society. You know, like, and the article cites two major events that happened, although we can probably go on and on about events that have occurred that have been traumatic. But one is when the massacre of Wall Street, and that was, I mean, now we're hearing a lot about that, where probably many of us didn't really know about that one. But today, we do know about such things as the recent event of George Floyd being murdered. And we have many events that have taken place during that time. It's really interesting because I did find a study, and it's the first study that's been done like this. It was done in 2018, and this is from the Harvard Gazette. And there was a study that was done where, well, it says it brings out all of the restlessness that's going on since the murder of Floyd. And there was a study that was done in 2018, and it found the police killing of an unarmed African-American triggered days of poor mental health for Black people living in that state over the following 3 months. And when we talk about the people who went through trauma, we're not just talking about George's family or people who were who knew him, or the people in his specific neighborhood or people around that neighborhood, but we're actually talking about people throughout, African-American people throughout the world and how it's affected them. And it shows that they actually had mental health issues for a period of time. And I can say personally that that was so traumatic for me. I didn't watch the news for about a year. And I'm a mental health professional. The study actually found that it wasn't every police shooting of a Black person, but it was the shooting of an unarmed Black person that was very significant in causing these mental health issues. And I think if we were to be honest, that all of us suffer from this PTSS. Is that what it is? Because that was a new term for me. But I think when I read it, I mean, I call it PTSD because that's what I'm familiar with. But PTSS that really describes what probably we all go through. And I always say that people of color need mental health just to deal with the issues that we have to deal with on a regular basis. But the traumatic issues of seeing people murdered, defenseless people for absolutely no reason, that is so traumatizing. It's just really overwhelming. It brings out here that folks who suffer from PTSS avoid certain places, people, or activities and events that may remind them of the individual of the trauma or experience. They have difficulty concentrating, feeling jumpy, or being easily angered. And this is really something because I always say to to people that know me, I said, please don't mention George Floyd because my head explodes. You know, so it's very difficult to listen to these things. Appearing emotionally numb, also called vacant esteem. This includes feeling of hopelessness, depression, and general self-destructive outlook. So, and I'm just not going to stay on my soapbox. I'm going to stop in a minute. But when folks were getting angry in the streets, there's a reason for that. You know, this is a major mental health issue where people feel like they've lost hope. Imagine a world where you feel like you have no hope, you're not validated. These cause not just anxiety and depression, although it causes that, but it can cause serious mental health issues, schizophrenia, homelessness. This can contribute to so many issues, social issues that we deal with. Oh, and here, I didn't even know that. Look, it says it in the article, schizophrenia. So, I mean, you can see where this is very serious, what we go through. And each time you have a traumatic event, like when I realized that I was so upset about George Floyd, I talked to someone. And that's what we need to do. We have to talk to someone so we can put things into perspective. Okay, Melissa.
Wow, thank you for that.
Yeah, you made great points, Julia. Because, and like you, before this, I had not heard of PTSS either. But when I was kind of looking at it, it lines right up with PTSD, but for the experience more so of people of color. You have the traumatic events that's happened, and even though it may or may not have happened to you individually. And so if it happens to you individually, I mean, you probably have experienced the symptoms even more so, but you still experience it. Because when we think about, I know for myself, sometimes when they would show clips of, police like shooting unarmed men. And that's, even though you weren't right there when it was happening, you are still getting the visual images of what's happening. And so that can cause, some of the PTSD, responses as well. And some of the symptoms, include is really replaying, the replaying of the event over in your minds, and how often, I know after George Floyd's murder, you would see it all over as far as, again, some like visuals, a lot of people talking about it. So it was just kind of the constant reminder of it. And, sometimes you just, like, I know even myself, when I was initially watching it a lot, would, even after I stopped watching it, would go back to thinking about it, and thinking about, what I was hearing. And it was very hard. And like Julia was saying, even being a mental health professional, like, we're not immune to it, not in the least. And so it was very difficult. And I think that it is so important for people, again, just education and awareness of it, so that we're able to look for some of the signs and symptoms of it, so that we're able to, once again, to deal with it by talking to somebody, to be able to process through it. It's a lot. And it didn't just start last year either. So this is, we're talking about years of issues.
Mhm.
Oh, thank you for that. It's just so interesting. Today, my son got pulled over by an officer, and we, well, of course, as a mother, my heart dropped. So instantly, I said to him, "You got this. Just stay calm." And then his sister, first thing he did was do the alert that lets you track somebody. He instantly activated that. Of course, I held my breath until he got back to me and knew he was okay. He sent a picture of the ticket. I was like, okay, that means he's okay. But he at least reached out to me, his sister, his dad. There was a network. But imagine folks that don't have that immediate network to have that, to be able to vent that off of. I mean, he expressed the frustration he felt. He says, every time I go through this town, pretty much I get pulled over. And I think, I know for me, there's certain towns I personally, every time I've gone through, pretty much, either you're followed and then they pull off, or you get the ticket. So it's so unfortunate that these are experiences, like you said, that certain things that we're dealing with day in and day out, that are on top of just the normal stressors of just being a person living in this country, dealing with the past pandemic and everything else that was going on. Now you had these added layers of distress on top of that you have to deal with. So ladies, we thank you so much for being able to just articulate for us what we're feeling, to be frankly honest with you, and just giving us that pass, especially culturally as women of color, to say, what, I don't have to be the superwoman, I don't have to be the Superman. This is, like you said, you tune up your body, you go to the doctor. I just did it, got my physical. I need to get the blood work done and making sure I'm tuning that up. That's fine. Well, there's nothing wrong with going and speaking to someone to tune up your mind. We all have stressors, whether it's school, work, home, family. There's so many things going on. It doesn't keep you from going and speaking to someone and saying, you know what? Let me just talk this out. Because you know what? We love our husbands and our kids and everything else, but they're not you. They're not going through what you're going through every single day. And even though they're wonderful and they try to understand, they don't always understand. And it's nice to go to someone who's trained to be able to just listen and let you work through what you're going through and kind of release some of the answers. So with that being said,
I just wanted to say thank you for sharing, Rachel, about your son. I'm glad your son is
no
okay.
problem. Thank
I'm
you.
glad he's okay. I just want to add that, yeah, just thinking about those who don't have that network, but even taking it a step further, it's extremely frustrating that we even have to have a network in place for getting pulled over, right? And I'm with you, because I am a Black mother of 3 Black teenagers, right? the fact that you have to tell your kids, stay calm, right? Here you are. You were the one being pulled over by someone in a position of authority, and you have to remain calm to keep them calm. You have to stay in control of the situation by being calm for yourself and for them. And that is extremely traumatizing. That is a lot. Um, even when you see the lights in your mirror, right? Your heart drops, your heart skips beats. It's like you catch yourself holding your breath, and they could just be passing by. So, um, that is very real. And I didn't want to skip over that without saying that I'm glad that he's okay, and I'm glad that you're okay.
Thank you for that.
Um,
It surprises you how it kind of like if everybody, I know everybody remembers 9/11. That was something that affected all of us as a country. And I kind of felt like, just even after this happened, my husband and I, we saw a house and we said, you know what, let's ride by. It's such a beautiful house. We wanted to check it out. So, my husband pulls up in the driveway and he's like, it was, vacant. No one's living there now, but it was up for sale. And so he was like, oh, let's just get out and check it out. And I'm like, no. Like I instantly, of course, where my mind went. And I instantly, it's like, no, we're not doing that. We can't do that. Like the fact that, I would be so like nervous and traumatized. And God, a few years ago, I wouldn't have thought about, you know what I mean, getting out and, oh, wow, look, this is nice and beautiful. You know what I mean? So it's just, you just don't realize how something affects you until you're up on that situation and now you're thrust in it and now you have to deal with it, to be frankly honest with you.
I
And we
just
do
added something in the
stress so
chat
much.
from what you educated me on, Rachel, about racial battle fatigue. So I
Mhm.
just put that in there because it goes with what we're
Oh,
talking
thank you
about.
for that. Yes.
Yeah, it's yeah, when you read about racial battle fatigue, it goes hand in hand with the post-traumatic slave syndrome and just everything that we're talking about right now, because it manifests itself in a physiological response. Um, so much of what racial battle fatigue, like, is what we're talking about right now. And it's a very real thing. And it also helps to validate you. Know that you're not, like
Oh
it's
God,
not
yes.
you. It's
Well,
not
you know
you.
what?
It's everything else. Yeah.
I have the advantage, of, like I was talking with Melissa before we got started. My daughter is going to be a clinician, and she happens to be going to specialize with what Melissa specializes in. So it was nice to be able to talk to her about it. And my daughter, actually, the terminologies I'm learning from my daughter, like she's educating the house here, right? And I was like, you can't keep psychoanalyzing all of us in the house. You know what I mean? Every time we do something, like, look, we're getting tired of this. You know what I mean? So, but we're learning to be able to know what these terms are, how to deal with even my husband. Like, I find it funny because we got 4 generations in the house. My husband's a young boomer. You got me, got the kids. My daughter's 27, my son's 22. So it's interesting how we're all have been cooped up in the house for like the last 18 months or so. And I have to say, blessings, we've been dealing with it, but it does show how the different age groups and different generations deal with the different stressors that we all have had to deal with in the last 18 months. So with that being said, I don't want to keep the conversation just to us fabulous ladies. I'm
Can
going to
can
open
I
it up.
just, Melissa, I mean, Rachel,
Oh
can I?
yes, I'm so sorry, Dr. Julie. Yes,
That's
absolutely.
okay, because as you guys are speaking about the situations with the officers and our young people, this is where community organizing comes in.
Absolutely.
Where we schedule some meetings where officers and folks from the community can sit down and talk and come to some type of understanding. I know I did that in my community. I went to the on a day when nothing was happening. I just went up to the police department and I just asked the officers if we can sit down and talk, and we did. Of course, eventually I got a business there, and they utilized me a lot, and we did a lot of community things together. And that gave them an opportunity to get to know some of our young people, and
Mhm.
and our young people an opportunity to get to know some of them. And that we really haven't had any incidents in our area, very few. But I think this is an opportunity for community organizations to use that platform to bring together groups of people, especially officers and folks from the community, so there can be a better understanding, and maybe we can avert some of these issues.
Oh, totally
No,
agree.
thank you. Yeah,
I
no,
think
thank
as people see us as humans and as like their brothers and their sisters,
Mhm.
their children, I think folks won't be so quick to
Mhm.
be able to dismiss someone's life or
Well, I,
someone's liberties.
as someone living in Virginia, let me just add, thank you so much, Reverend Doctor, for that. For that, I agree, and I wish it was so simple. Sometimes, I will say here in Virginia, we have tried that, and believe it or not, we get pushback and resistance from police.
Mm.
Really?
Yes, we do. Yes, that has, like, we've tried, and it is, when you get a chance, look at Richmond, Virginia, and look at a lot of the, as the quote unquote, the unrest from last summer, the protesting happening, the marching, it went on every night for several months, and it was not just about George Floyd, but we had police officers pepper spraying, um, driving through crowds, and all of this, and excuses being made. And like I said, the offer was made. It's been made over several years, and last year during this time, in just like a 3-month period, maybe not even 3 months, maybe like 2-month period, Richmond City went through 3 police chiefs. 3. And one of them, we found out after he was promoted that he shot an unarmed black man in the back several years ago, and the family thought that he actually was no longer with the department. They had no idea until they saw his face, and he was being promoted to police chief. So these are the things that some of our communities are dealing with, and like I said, I definitely think that we should try. I
Mm-hmm.
actually am a community organizer, so I feel you on that. I
Mm-hmm.
just I also, I wouldn't be a community organizer if I didn't also acknowledge that the community does try, and sometimes they're not being reciprocated.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, but yeah, we continue.
We have to keep
Yeah,
trying. Yep. All we can
yeah,
do
we
is keep
continue.
trying, and the pendulum will continue to move. With that, ladies, I want to remind everybody, if you wouldn't mind, if you would like to ask our fabulous doctors a question, if you wouldn't mind putting your hand up, and us ladies are going to try to call on you in order. Please give us grace as we go through that process. Looks like we have, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Beulah. Did you want to ask a question? You can want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, I wanted to say that I'm one of these people that do believe in counseling, and I have utilized my EAP a whole lot during this pandemic, because it's not only George Floyd, it goes back to Breonna Taylor, it goes back
Mm-hmm.
to the little
Mm-hmm.
boy that was in the park with a water gun.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it goes all the way back to you talk about not watching TV. It goes back to Michael Jackson and Luther Vandross and Prince. All of them had some kind of, made me feel some kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
And so during all these times, I wouldn't watch TV, and I found myself at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, calling EAP just to have somebody hear me.
Hmm.
And I have a son that was in the military, and he was in where he was stationed was in the backwoods, I consider. And I always told him to put his army hat up in the window, his dog tags on the over the rearview mirror, so that if he got stopped, that they would immediately see that he was associated with the military. So,
Hmm.
but I'm with this pandemic though. I have become I tell everybody I'm in solitary confinement,
Mm.
because I just stay
No.
in the house. I don't,
Yeah, Ms. Bueller, thank you for
and I know that's
sharing your
not good.
story with us, and thank your son for his service too. Thank you for that. But yeah, I have to admit, I'm kind of feeling the same way. I jokingly say it, but I do feel a sense of wanting to stay home, kind of creating my little oasis at home and staying there and not being as outwardly social as I usually am and going out and, in the public and intermingling now that we're allowed to open up and go out again. I really am kind of going to have to do it in stages, I believe, because right now I'm just not feeling as comfortable just jumping back out there again. um so I think we kind of had like you said, our own little oasis, our cocoon, our house, and now all of a sudden we have to go out into this world that we were watching on TV for over 18 months and the things that were going on and we were experiencing, and now we have to go out there now and deal with that. Thank you for that. Is there anyone
I
else
only go out to go to the doctor or to the pharmacy, but I make my trips. It takes a lot for me to go out the door. My husband does all the outside stuff mainly, but I know he can't go to the doctor for me, and so I take a deep breath and go, and I try to do
Yes.
everything I have to do while I'm out on that one trip.
Wow, thank you for that. Doctors, did you have anything for Ms. Bueller?
Ms. Bueller, just keep encouraging your families and friends to seek mental health when they're having issues, and let them know that it's helped you and encourage them to also seek it. Thank you.
And thank you for sharing. I fully commend you for taking that step. It's always the hardest step to take, is to reach out for help, but you did it. And also just the idea you mentioned that you just wanted to be heard. And I think that's a key thing, that a lot of us just want to be heard.
Yeah.
So I encourage you also just to keep on speaking and keep on reaching out, for help, one step at a time.
Yes, thank you for that. That's so profound. We just want to be heard in the end. Wow. All right, look, Cass, do we have anybody else that have a question for the doctors? Don't be shy, ladies. This is our opportunity to be able and allies, to be able to,
Please don't be shy.
talk
Don't
to
be
the
shy.
doctors,
I actually do have a question if you're talking about allies. So, I've, being part of this group, I've learned quite a bit from the different communities. I mean, there are things that I knew, but then there's things that I learned. And so how do I, talk to other people about this without, feeling like I feel guilt because I feel like I'm triggering things or reminding people things. And at the same time, I feel like we have to keep letting people know. And I've actually talked to, you know, uh, white people who are not necessarily allies, but they've been like, they're actually drilling in them. So I'm kind of glad for that too. But at the same time, they're like, oh, it's enough. It's enough. And I'm like, no, if you're just starting to get it and you're getting frustrated. And I'm like, why do you feel like it's enough? He goes, because it feels so bad. So I'm talking about like, these are people who are not, not very open-minded. And even they're like feeling like, I don't know if it's guilt or trauma by it. So I just, I want to make sure that, the message keeps getting out there, but in a way that doesn't continue to keep hurting people. Like I'm trying to understand and being conscientious as well as empathetic, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And there's absolutely a way to do that. And it's just sharing in a way that's not attacking. I think that when something, because you can't change the way somebody perceives something. So if, somebody of another, that's not of color, they might perceive it as being attacked, or because they may be feeling guilty because they're a part of a particular group themselves, that's not your fault. As long as you yourself are not being attacking or aggressive, in your messaging, then you should be able to share it.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly that, and it's not easy because, when you're going through your trauma yourself and you're trying to explain to someone, the different circumstances that you see occurring around you. Like, I mean, I think that the social injustices in the communities of people of color, is just as much of a crisis as COVID. And so when you're trying to explain social injustices or racial injustices, it is a point where it's difficult not to get emotional about it. And I just think it takes time and attention, because I know that I'm one who, I always say I'm working on it, because it's not easy, but I think that people can hear you better if you're softer and you take their feelings into consideration and try to come from, in social work, we always say, start where they are and just maybe nudge your way into the next topic. So it's really a matter of effective communication.
Wow, thank you.
But
Such
you're not
excellent
kidding,
advice.
Dr. Julia, because like when those 8 people and the 6 Asian American women were murdered in Georgia, like it hit me much harder. And I've been organizing for decades, and I just and I will tell you, part of the trauma was people calling me to offer condolences, and it's just like, I don't know. I appreciate it, but at the same time, I felt like I had to condole them when I could barely deal with it myself, and I was trying to process it. And I don't want to do that to my friends, when I learn something, I don't immediately want to run to like Rachel and be like, oh, I learned about this trauma that happened to enslaved people, because I don't want to do that to them. But at the same time, I want them to understand that I'm understanding. These are things that I want to be able to go out there and fight with them, or, fight this issue and get it out there.
Right.
So I have a question, something different, because I used to work with a lot of adolescents before and during law school and all that. So that's what I did, and represent parents with children with special needs. And I think a lot of times we sort of overlook the little ones and the effect on them with all that's happening, right? So we know that adults right off the bat, because we talk about it, so we see it and we understand it, and so on and so forth. But I think sometimes we miss how much the kids internalize everything that's happening around them, and they may not necessarily articulate it. And a lot of times it translates into a certain type of behavior. And, they'll call them bad kids, they'll call them a position of defiance, and all these things that come out. So do you ever get the chance to work with the younger kids or adolescents to sort of try to figure out a way to assist them in what they're seeing and what they're feeling? Because they see it out there, and then of course it affects the adults around them, and so then they see the results of it at home, and they may not quite understand all the time, but their behavior sometimes will show it, and parents don't always realize that's what's happening. They just think, something is wrong with my kid. Why is he acting this way? Do you ever get an opportunity to either work with the kids or the parents, or adults or caregivers?
I've worked with children in the past. I was actually a school social worker, but I recently took a course, and you know what I found out? I found out that it's like in the 96th percentile of the mass murderers that we have. They were actually bullied when they were kids. And it's in the 90, it's like 96% or something like that, something similar to that. And I was astounded when I read that. Our children take everything in, and they feel things just like we do, and they need intervention the intervention, if we can start it, we need so much more mental health, so much more mental health services in our schools, in our elementary schools, because if we can focus on issues that children have um, in their formative years, in those lower years, if we can meet with their parents and help their parents to understand and learn parenting, we can help a lot more young people to have success in their lives. And I'm happy to say that in our practice, Melissa has done such a great job with the practice, and I'm so thrilled to work for her because she does have specialists that actually do this, and so I'm going to throw it over to her.
And thank you, Julia. Yep, we actually do. My background, I used to do a lot of work with children and adolescents. And more recently, I was doing a lot of trauma work with children and adolescents. And one of the big things really for, children and adolescents is talking about it. So I know when you were mentioning, how do we, these kids are seeing what's going on either in the media, they're experiencing it, they're going home, hearing their parents talk about it. So the way to help them through it is to process, what their thoughts and feelings are about all of this information that's coming in, and then just kind of taking it from there, depending on how they're processing. Because a lot of times if somebody's processing information in a way and kind of associating it in a negative connotation, then that can cause problems versus them kind of processing and being educated about what was going on, and understanding that what they're feeling is okay to help them through can be very beneficial. And like Julia was saying, part of the practice, I'm really striving to be able to also reflect, in having different therapists that work with people of all ages, but have specialty areas. So there are clinicians within the practice that work specifically with children. I have people that work with kids from age 3, can work with the kids from age 3 and up, because I think that it's kids need it too, children and adolescents. We can't forget about the kids by any means because they're experiencing the world, just how we experience the world, but oftentimes they have less of an understanding about what's going on. And that in and of itself can cause so many problems when they just don't understand or know how to express themselves. And then they end up expressing themselves in negative ways that can come out as, bullying and things like that.
Do you ever, or have you ever made it into the school system? Because depending on where, I used to have a lot more difficulty getting counseling for my students within the school system, especially in Maryland. Because I represent kids in DC, but sometimes through the Child Protective Services, they'll be placed in a home in Maryland, but they are technically DC kids, but because they're placed in a home in Maryland, they're going to school in Maryland. So it's a different thing trying to get counseling for them in school by either a licensed psychologist or counselor, not the school counselor that takes care of all the other kids, but whether you've ever done something like that or ever considered something, because it's really a needed, it's something that's really needed for our kids, because our kids spend more time in school than they do with their parents. And people don't ever really think about that, but they really do spend more time in school than they do with the parents at home, at least quality time onto the weekends. So I think what you are doing, and it sounds so amazing, it's something that's really needed, because if you can take care of the kids at an early age and the adolescents, may not need it for the adults, right?
Exactly.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to just follow up with what Fatmata was saying. Yes, I am so appreciative that you ladies are doing this work with, especially our adolescents at this age, right now at this stage, because I will tell you the past 4 years for our kids have been extremely traumatizing. It was traumatizing for adults, especially Black people, people of color. Our
Mhm.
kids, the kids are always watching. And, in the beginning, 2017, so many parents would say, no, I think my kids are too young, right? Like they're too young. I don't think I need to talk to them about this. And as time has gone on, they realized you don't have to talk to them, but somebody's talking to them. The kids are hearing, whether they're going to school and maybe their classmate doesn't come back. The kids are asking questions, they're hearing, they also see TV, they have cell phones, CNN pops up, news, all these things are popping up. And so I will tell you, as a parent, you know, with my youngest is on the spectrum. He's extremely high functioning, but he's still autistic nonetheless. Um, he's one of those, he's neurodivergent, but he can pass. If people don't realize, it means he can also fall through cracks. But for us, it was navigating so he didn't become angry and bitter and full of hate and become the very thing that he was upset about. And that is a thing. And now, talking to other parents, that has been a struggle for a lot of us over the past 4 years, is preventing our kids from becoming so angry and hate filled at just seeing all the racism and hatred in the world. And, it's, why do they hate me so much? With my, he's 14 now, but when he was 12, he began saying Trump as an adjective, right? As an adjective or a pronoun to describe other people, because that's how he was associating it. And so just having to break that from them is very tricky, because you have to make sure that you validate them, right? Like they're not, once again, you're not going crazy. These things are very real, but I don't want you to turn into the very thing that is bothering you. And so that is a very difficult space to navigate as a Black parent, especially. And so just, I would, I welcome any suggestions or ideas, because it's an ongoing thing, to prevent that.
Well, open communication is like really very important, and not overlooking everything that you're seeing, your children are seeing also. So, I often ask folks, do you guys have dinner together? Because, there's a commercial about the dinner table and how important that is. Or at the dinner table, you can have those conversations openly and honestly. And then if somebody really has a significant issue and you're noticing it, then you should seek professional help for your children, because um, then whatever issue that they have, it can be reconciled, reduced, perhaps eliminated um, at a young age, because you don't want them to continue to have the same baggage. Believe me, when you have issues, you have trauma, you have loss, the pain, the emotional pain and distress that you're dealing with when you experience these different tragedies and emotions, they don't go anywhere unless you resolve them. So it becomes very important that when issues arise, that there's open, honest communication. And if the issue continues to exist, the parents have to take the lead in assuring, just like when your child has a cold or the flu or something, assuring that the proper medical attention is given to the issue.
And piggybacking off of Julia, that, these issues, they can be resolved, but they can only be resolved if the steps are taken to get to that point, to get to that place. And it does, absolutely. I also agree that it starts with open communication and allowing the space for open communication as well. Because I think that if the child or adolescent knows that, and feels safe enough, to share with their parents, they most likely will.
Wonderful. I had a question for you, Dr. Melissa. Are you doing telehealth currently right now?
I'm sorry, telehealth. Yeah. So right now we're fully telehealth, 100%. And that is something that we're actually looking at when at some point we will be going back to in office, not fully in office, but as needed.
Do you think
Because I'm sorry.
I apologize. I was going to say, do you think you'll continue the hybrid of in office as well as telehealth for the community?
Absolutely, because as of right now, we're 100% telehealth. When we go back, we'll still be 50% or more telehealth, but just again, offering in person as needed. Because there are some situations where in office sessions might be more helpful. And also there are some people that just really don't want to do telehealth at all. And so, and I recognize that. So as we start to open back up, we'll start to gradually offer some in-office sessions.
Wonderful. Do you mind, everyone, if you don't mind, Doctor, I'm going to share your website. For everyone that's listening, it's www.morningjoycounseling.com, and that's www.morningjoycounseling.com. Please remember to everyone, self-care like we do with our bodies. We need to do it for our minds as well. We need to look out for our loved ones.
There's a comment in
There's
the
a comment.
chat.
Oh, ladies, you mind grabbing it for me, please?
Yes. So I see Miss Linda in the chat. She said, my nephew and niece are 13 and 10, and I'm seeing signs of depression in them. They experienced deaths of 2 family members for the first time. I suspect that along with the isolation from school are factors. So any suggestions for Miss Linda?
Counseling.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. If you yourself are seeing that there's symptoms within them, it might be time to reach out.
So this is her nephew and niece. So how can she get their parents?
Oh, have a conversation with their parents. See if their parents kind of notice that as well, and if their parents do notice it, and then suggest counseling. Even if it's just going in for the first session to have a professional to do an assessment, on them to see if in fact they do have symptoms of depression or any other issues that they may not be expressing, but might express to another person.
And I think this is really, this just goes back to what Fatmata was saying too, about making sure we have counselors in school, because and I don't know, I'm not saying that this is the situation with Linda at all, but I definitely know that there are some families, where aunt, uncle, or a friend of the family will notice depression in children, but the parents are not going to be as welcoming to mental health care, right? And so it's, how do you make sure that the kids are getting the help if the parents won't do it when they're minors? And the easiest solution to that would be having that mental health care in schools where the kids could go and make that decision. And it is frustrating because, we have, and we definitely need it, but we definitely, we have the clinics in school for kids to go, when they're a certain age, to make sure that they are learning about their bodies and can protect themselves. Once again, we need that. But at the same time, we definitely need to have that protection for their mental health, because we have to break the cycle somewhere. And if we don't, if they continue on that cycle and not getting the help because their parents don't see the value, then, we're just, the cycle continues.
Right.
Yeah, and unfortunately, in the school system, for something like that, unfortunately, in that scenario, you would need a parental consent. Unless your child is at a certain age, wherein at that point they can get up out of the classroom and go do the counseling. But especially if they're young, there has to be some form of parental consent, unless the school believes that whatever is going on with the child is affecting the child in school. Then the school can take a proactive step through the system to say this child needs the services, and then the school has to show why the child needs services before that can be even discussed to be done, which is, but parental rights is still parental rights, right?
2 points. One is the conversation is actually taking place now about putting more mental health supports into school systems. And I know when I had my practice, I actually donated a therapist to the school. I can't remember, maybe for about 3 or 4 months, to do counseling. And what we arranged is we arranged for the therapist to go in and do group counseling in different classes. However, she's correct, the parents had to sign off, but it was easier to get the parents to sign off in that environment. So, so I think I know the conversation is taking place at this point about more mental health supports in the school system. So hopefully, as we move forward, that's something we'll see.
Yeah, and group therapy usually is a little more easier for parents to swallow than knowing someone's going to come into the class, pull the child, take them for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or an hour for services, and then bring them back. And even the kids feel funny because there's this thing, oh, they're coming to get you from class for whatever. So walking into the class and doing a group session could be a way to sort of open the door, right?
Right.
Thank you
So
for that,
Shayna.
ladies. We did have, if I'm
Shayna,
saying your
maybe?
name correctly, Shayna, did you have a question?
Hi, it's actually Hannah.
Hannah, oh, thank you so
Sorry.
much for correcting me. Hannah, oh, beautiful name. Please
Thank
ask
you.
your question.
Well, it was really more of an observation because I spent the last few years of my career as a pediatric clinical supervisor, and you have to navigate cultural and religious waters when you're going to talk to parents about the mental health of their children. I'm Jewish, and our practice was in a Orthodox Jewish community. There are some conversations you're simply not going to have with parents, even trying to talk to parents about giving the HPV vaccine. I mean, this is delicate. There are rabbis involved, and it's a whole different world than the outside world. But that's also true with other religions. So when we talk about mental health in adolescence, what I found the greatest barrier are parents, to the point where kids would, ask their parents to get them a glass of water or something so they could whisper something to me, to tell me something. And it's sad, it's heartbreaking because you really can't. I mean, you have a code of ethics you have to follow, there are protocols you have to follow, and you can't step outside of that. So for Linda's question, since there are parents involved, that might be very difficult to do. It's just super touchy.
Wow, thank you for that perspective. Um, you know, Linda, it's a beautiful thing that you're seeing it and acknowledging it, and you know something needs to be done. So hopefully, like everyone's saying, hopefully, if we can get to the parents and ease that dialogue in gradually, that maybe there'll be some grace there to be able to additionally get that initial assertion that would be needed for the children. And hopefully, I try to be slick. Thought I was being slick with my kids. I used to would find a movie or get them a book to read. Oh, by the way, did you check this book out or did you read this movie? And, hoping that that message in that movie or that book, would click. I was pretty savvy. 9 times out of 10 it worked, but we could try to maybe give it a try with this scenario. Maybe have the parents come over and watch a movie that might address a certain issue, and then maybe it might hit a light bulb with them, and it might turn something they might want to discuss it or act.
Right. And another thing really quick that might be helpful too is to find out from the parents if they have any issues, with their kids. because sometimes that could be your in. So like if they're having, like, let's say they feel like their kid isn't as social, they want their kid to hang out with their friends more. Well, then that could be your in to say, oh, well, if you want them to be more social, let's check to find out if there's something that's causing them not to be social. So maybe by going to see a counselor, that can help them, to see if there's anything going on so that we can try to get them to be more social. So try to get the parents on board with it by seeing what the parent goal is for their child. So that helps a lot of times too.
And also when you talk to the parent, also see what their academics have been lately, because a lot of times academics are a sign of what is happening with the child. And if for whatever reason they are not doing as well, the parents might say, well, it's the pandemic, they've been sort of out of it, they're not learning the same way. But again, as the doctor just said, you can use that as an in to kind of be like, well, maybe you should just look into it. Because that's how I used to talk to my parents, right? Because when I'm trying to convince them they should put counseling on the IEP, which is Individualized Educational Program plan, they, especially Black parents, they balk at the idea. There's nothing wrong with my kid. Nobody said there's anything wrong with your kid, but it could help sort of focus him or her on what is going on in the classroom and things like that. It's just to see, let them do a comprehensive assessment that can kind of tell you where they are academically, because this comprehensive assessment also assesses the emotional aspect, not just the academic. So that kind of gives an idea, and then the professional can tell them what's going on instead of you telling them what's going on.
Thank you for that, Kamata. Well, ladies, wow. Is there anyone else that had any questions? We have these fabulous ladies with us tonight, Dr. Julia, Dr. Melissa, to talk to. Ladies, wow, you've been just a depth of knowledge and information. Ladies, snaps, right? I know I've picked up some stuff tonight that I'm going to take back and utilize. This is what we want to do, ladies. We have to keep talking. We have to keep being the stewards in our communities, making sure we're getting information out, and making sure it's trickling down to our families and our friends in our community. So please share far and wide, and just make sure that you're reaching out to loved ones and just making sure they're okay. Doctors, did you want to leave us with any parting words?
Encourage your friends and family to seek proper mental health care as needed. And I really appreciate you guys having us here and the opportunity to share information and also to listen to your thoughts and the information that you provided to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Melissa?
So actually, I'm not a doctor.
You're my doctor.
Okay, but thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah, also thank you so much, seriously, for having us here. I think that this is an important topic, important topics to really talk about. And I also want to say that, just really be aware of kind of what's going on for yourself, like in your bodies. When you start noticing a shift, just kind of listen to that, because sometimes it's just your body telling you, okay, it's time for you to, get it checked out or look into it a little bit more. So it may be time to go seek out, a mental health professional, just like, again, you would seek out your doctor if you had an ongoing stomach ache, that's just not going away. So I just really encourage you to do that. And I encourage each of you to keep on speaking as well, until someone hears you, because one person may not hear you, but keep on speaking until you feel that you are heard. And just be encouraged, be encouraged, be encouraged. And thank you so much once again for having us here.
Oh, it was a pleasure and honor. And thank you for joining us this evening. Ladies, from the Women of Color Coalition, anything else you have? If not, we're going to say good night, and thank you again for such a wonderful, wonderful dialogue and sharing such valuable information for us in the community. With that being said, good night from Women of Color Coalition, and a special thank you to our two fabulous ladies for joining us. Have a good evening. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank
you.